Yeah, new try with the ZOHD Alpha Strike after the not so successful maiden you might have seen in my last video. I also found out what the issue was. The antennas of my RXSR receiver were too close to the video transmitter, and the telemetry output of the receiver caused some interferences in the VTX, and this caused the video dropouts. Now I have changed to the emergency ghost system and also placed the antennas differently. This should give me a reliable link without any video problems again. So cross your fingers that this time everything goes well, and let's get this thing in the air. As you can see, the launch was pretty unspectacular. Some torque roll to the left again, as on the maiden flight with the default pits, because I have not tuned the plane yet, of course. But I did some auto tune in this flight, you will see later. Unfortunately, on landing I forgot to disarm, and therefore also saving the values. So also the second flight will be on default pits, but I didn't realize that until I finished that day, basically. So all the acro flights are on stock INAV pits. But that's not a problem. The plane flies pretty good at these pits. The rates are not high enough actually, so it's a little bit slow on the roll axis and also on the pitch axis. But that's not a big issue as long as the plane flies completely stable. At least this time we got some stick time, and I was able to get a real feel how the plane actually flies and how it behaves in the air. And here you can see I do the auto tune. I also enable the tuning OSD in a second to show you the values, how they change. My buddy with the quad was landing a little bit close to me, so this caused some interferences here. And also later you will see some breakups when he flies around me. This was the final result of the auto-tune. Unfortunately, I cannot tell much about the rates because I forgot to save and I don't have the rates here in my OSD. But after the auto-tune, I did some low high-speed passes, you can see here. And as you can already hear, the plane really likes to scream. So this is definitely nothing for a neighborhood that's a little bit sensitive to loud noises. But as we all know, things that bring fun are usually a little bit louder. After the quick auto-tune, I was just flying around a little bit and doing some low altitude passes. Unfortunately, my batteries I have in this size are all pretty much done, and as you can see on the low voltage of this 2600 mAh pack, I wasn't able to fly very long on high power. So I quickly landed, replaced the battery, and with the GNB it was a little bit better, but also not perfect, unfortunately. As already experienced in the maiden, you really need to have a long path for landing because the plane glides so long. So at around 40 km/h, just do a nice flare for a soft touchdown. And landing is much easier in FPV than it is actually line of sight if you are not used to it. Yeah, this was the new maiden flight. I now replaced the battery with a GNB 2600 mAh that has a little bit more power. And I also replaced the prop with a Gamfan Flash 6x4.2. And let's see how much performance this gives. This launch was also pretty unspectacular. As you can see, again a bit of torque roll because the tuning from the last flight was not saved. So the feed forward is still a little bit low, but that's not a big problem, as if the plane gets enough speed, it can easily realign. And with that pack, immediately I did some full throttle speed runs, and now we reached the 184 km/h without problem. And it is advertised with 185 with the stock prop. even that I have some a little bit less pitch than the stock prop right now, but maybe a little bit more efficient prop, I reach around the same speeds without any problem. And after some flying around, I also tested some dive speeds, first with a more shallow dive at around 45 or 30 degrees down pitch, and here I reached a little bit over 200 kilometers per hour. And on the next dive, I reached my top speed of 221, if I remember correctly. With the other prop, with a little bit more pitch in the dive, I reached 233 kilometers per hour. But yeah, as I said, in level flight, there's a little bit less thrust due to the smaller diameter. So in level flight, it was slower, but in a dive, it was a little bit faster. And yeah, here we had the top speed of 221 kilometers per hour. And at this speed, even with the low feed forward, the roll rate really goes up. But at lower speeds, it's much slower. After tuning, that would be much better. But it would also need some TPA tuning to actually get proper rates over the whole speed range, because the speed range on this plane is really big. What I also did during this flight is some testing of the autonomous modes, at least for return to home. So I flew a little bit further out, and then when I had some breakups anyway because of some bushes that were in the way, I turned around here and I hit return to home. Unfortunately, my throttle stick was a little bit too high, so the plane was still throttling up a little bit more than it should. The setting is at 20% cruise throttle. That should maintain a stable flight at a good speed where it can navigate at home. And as you can see, I fixed the return to home settings compared to the maiden flight. So the final loiter altitude is not 30 centimeters, but now 30 meters. And the return to home altitude is 80 meters, and that's pretty much stable. It just overshot a little bit at the beginning, but it's totally fine for this plane to come home alone. The Alpha Strike is not made for any kind of long range anyway, or navigation mode, so it's just, at least for me, it's just a pure fun flyer. So I don't care about very stable or very reliable autonomous flights. It's just as a safety measure in this case. So yeah, as you can see, the return to home pretty much fine. It brings the plane back, that's the main target. And after that, I just had some fun and was ripping around. Yeah, now that I have flown a few packs and I think I tested the plane thoroughly on flight performance and what it is capable of, I think it's time for a final review or final result. Basically everything I said in the first video still applies. Nothing has changed on that. This is for sure not a beginner's plane. The setup is a little bit special compared to some other airplanes, and also the rates and yeah, the launch behavior is a little bit difficult. With low experience, you will have a hard time to launch this plane. If you use auto launch, of course, that makes some things easier, but then you still have to land manually. Two things are very important to keep in mind. One thing is the mixer. The manual says just 12 millimeters up and down throw for the ailerons, but in my opinion that's totally fine for pitch, but way too much for roll. So what I ended up with is a mixer that gives 60% servo throw with the plug and play servos on the pitch axis and just 30% at max on the roll axis. Because if you fly in manual mode, if you like to fly it, then really it goes completely crazy and does 2.5 or 3 rounds per second on the roll axis, and this is totally crazy. Yeah, so I recommend a 25 to 30% mix for roll and just about 6, maybe 7 millimeters of throw on the roll axis. The second thing to keep in mind is that the plug-and-play version is completely, as it is, balanced or at its limit. So as soon as you plan to install a bigger motor, stronger motor for higher speeds than the plug-and-play setup can achieve, you have to do some modifications. First of all, you need to stiffen the ailerons, maybe with some laminate or with some thin carbon sheets you glue on. You have to stiffen them, or maybe just replace them completely with balsa ailerons. The reason for that is if the plane passes 210 or 220 kilometers per hour, they will flex so much, or the servos are too weak to handle the speeds, so you will have a hard time to pull out of that dive at that full speed, and you really feel how the plane starts to roll or to pitch by itself, just because the ailerons can't keep up with the speed. That has to be kept in mind. If you buy the plug-and-play version, if you want to fly it as it comes with the plug-and-play, then it's totally fine, and you will have a lot of fun. Yeah, beside that, as I said, everything I said in the first video still applies. So for me, this plane is definitely a lot of fun, and maybe it will get a HD split cam or shark bite in the future with HD FPV. But for now, let's end this here. If you liked that video, then leave a thumbs up and maybe also subscribe to my channel. That would be great. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.